Hey folks, it's Brittany, your favorite plant-loving internet stranger, here with another plant video. Today we're going to get into my process for bringing new plants into my home, specifically plants that I've picked up at big box stores. I've noticed that some bigger box hardware stores like Home Depot or Lowe's, while they do have garden centers, they don't put as much care and attention into their indoor plant section as they do the outdoor plants. For example, at my local Home Depot, the indoor plants are usually off to the side. They're inside of the store, sort of like right before you get to the garden center that's outside with all of the outdoor plants and like the pavers and things like that, any like garden equipment. And they're just kind of off to this corner. And they usually have a bunch of really nice indoor plants. They're all really closely packed together. They're dusty. They don't get the same light, you know, that the outdoor plants are getting. They're not watered as frequently. I hardly ever see any employees over there tending to them. And sometimes they just look really wilted and really sad, but they're inexpensive. So that's why I'm a big fan of looking at these big box stores for plants, because you could find some really highly coveted plants that might be on your dream plant wish list at these stores for a fraction of what you would pay at a traditional plant nursery or an online or even a local plant boutique shop. But because they're not always as well maintained, you will need to do a little bit of maintenance after you bring them home, just to make sure you're not introducing any pests to any existing plants you have, and just also to make sure that you're, you know, doing your due diligence and making sure that this is a healthy plant that you're bringing into your home. The same goes for other big box stores like grocery stores or like department type stores. And I'm using department stores loosely to like classify a store like Target. You know, not all Targets sell grocery items. And I have seen plants in my local Target. I don't know who's like which celebrity campaign or like what designer was like selling plants, but I've walked in Target and seen plants on the shelf and they weren't doing that great. The same goes for shops that don't have garden centers like your local grocery stores. I'll occasionally find really nice, highly coveted plants at my local Trader Joe's or other big box stores in the area, but they're not typically well maintained. In this video, I'll be sharing some tips that have worked for me when I've purchased plants from big box stores. The first thing I'd recommend doing when you bring any plant into your home, regardless of where you get it from, but especially if you get it from one of these big box stores, is to actually look at the plant. Obviously, if you're at the store, you pick a plant off the shelf because you like it, you've seen it, you know, so you know what it looks like, but really look at it. You wanna inspect the plant for pests. You wanna look under the leaves. You wanna look down the stem into the soil. Actually look at the soil, you know, like you might wanna shake the plant around a little bit to see if you see any movement, as in something that could potentially be crawling in it or on the soil. And also look really closely at the leaves. If you see any type of movement, any sort of pest, think twice about whether or not you want to take that plant home. Spider mites to me are one of the easiest pests to get rid of. I've dealt with them a few other times before, once after bringing a plant home from Trader Joe's. But if you can avoid having to deal with that, I would recommend it, especially if you have a lot of other plants. Let's say you don't really take a look at the plant, you're not inspecting it in the way that you might want to. You bring it home and then you discover that the plant has little spider webs all over it, or you suddenly see you're in better lighting so you can see that there are little bugs crawling on it. You don't want to bring that into your home if you can avoid it. So take a look while you're at the store to see if you see any signs of life that should not be there, any pests, any critters, any spiders or little other things that you don't want to be bringing into your house. If the soil is wet and then you see like gnats flying away from it, just leave the plant there. It's not worth it. I don't care how much it costs, unless you know what you're doing, unless you have the space in your home to be able to rehab this plant safely away from your other plants. Because what's going to happen is you're going to take this plant home, sit it with your other plants and infest all of them, and then you're going to have a bigger problem on your hands. Another thing you might want to check for when you're at the store is to see if your plant is root bound. So in order to do this, you would just pick the plant up and look at the bottom to see if there are roots coming out of the drainage holes. That sounds really creepy. It can look really creepy. you know, if you're not expecting to see that. But what that really means is that the plant is outgrowing its pot. So that's an indicator to you that the plant is growing. That's good. And it has the potential to grow more, but it needs to be repotted sooner rather than later once you take it home. So when a plant is root bound, that means that the roots are bound together so tightly that it will make it difficult to water the plant, because the water won't even be able to get to the roots properly. It'll be difficult for the plant to grow in the way that it should, because there's no room for the plant to grow in the pot. It's essentially that the pot is too small. Usually if you look under a plant, like lift the plant up, like literally pick it up while you're at the store and look, if you see roots coming out the bottom of it, that means it's root bound. Which can be a good thing if you are someone who wants a plant that's going to grow quickly. I personally like to grab root bound plants if I can find them, because I know that their growing potential is there, and I know that I usually am going to repot the plants anyway. So if I can get a plant that I know is in a really active growing cycle that I feel comfortable repotting, then I will buy that plant, take care of it once I get home, and eventually end up repotting it within a week or two of purchasing it. If you don't repot your root bound plant, you will notice that as you water it, the water won't really be absorbed by the plant because its roots can't even get to the water. They're all over the place. They're too big for the pot that it's in. And so it's just gonna make it difficult for the plant to absorb the water. And it's also gonna make it difficult for the plant to continue to grow. And if you do not want to worry about having to repot a plant immediately, just don't get the plant that looks like it's root bound. Some plants like being root bound, but that's a story for a different day. The next thing I will usually do is to spray the plant down with insecticidal soap or with a neem oil and water mixture. So either in a spray bottle with water and neem oil, shake it up, spray the plant down. Actually, before this, you might want to actually put if you can, put the plant either in the sink or in the bathtub, or if you have access to outside in a water hose, that would be even better, so you're not worrying about getting soil all over the place or in the drain or things like that. Wipe the leaves off. You know, if you have like a little spray bottle of just plain water, you just want to clean the leaves. The purpose of all of this is to clean the leaves, give it a good soak, you know, with some water. You can water the plant at this point as well, and then spray it down with that insecticidal soap or that neem oil water mixture. What you're doing is being preventative, because you can look at this plant all day in the store, not see any pests, bring it back home, and then all of a sudden the next day there's something that might appear. And that is simply because we're humans, we have regular human eyes, you know, we don't see things on the microscopic level, or we might not see things while we're in the store. These little pests may be hiding. So what you want to do is just make sure you are properly washing the leaves off, and then once you have washed the leaves off, just spray it down with this insecticidal soap. The reason for doing this is just to simply have a layer of protection to make sure that any critters that you may have not been able to see while you were at the store, or maybe you missed it completely and, you know, once you got home you saw something, is just to make sure you're getting all of that, whatever potential pests might be on the plant, that you're getting rid of those. And then also, if it's a dusty plant, like, let's be honest, right? A lot of these stores, like I mentioned earlier, are not taking care of their plants. So you might have a plant that's a really great plant at a good price, but it's dry, it needs to be watered, the leaves are dirty. So you just want to wash all of that stuff off. Plants are not going to be able to properly photosynthesize if the leaves are dirty and dusty. This is definitely something you want to do when you're bringing a new plant into your house, but also something that you want to get into the habit of doing when you're actually watering your plants on a regular basis. I'm not saying you got to go through and like wipe every leaf down. You can do that if you want to, but it's really important to just, at a minimum, you know, spray them down with a little water bottle or a water hose or something, but to just regularly spritz them with some sort of an insecticidal soap. And you can usually, the insecticidal soap does not need to be rinsed off. You just spray that on there, you know, go off of whatever the directions are, but typically you just spray it on there, it'll evaporate. It's non-toxic, you know, like it's safe for the plants, but it'll kill the pests. And if you use an insecticidal soap, just make sure that you are mindful of where you're using it. You want to make sure you're using an insecticidal soap that is going to be used in a specific area. So don't get some sort of pesticide, spray your plants down, and then put the plants outside and then start spraying outside, because you run the risk of killing beneficial insects. You don't want anything, you don't want to be out here killing bees or butterflies or any other pollinators. Like, those are beneficial insects, or ladybugs, but you want to kill them spider mites. We don't have time for spider mites or for mealybugs or for whatever else, right? You don't want those. So just be mindful. Usually the bottle will tell you the types of insects this is good for. If you have any question, if you're at a garden shop or something, you can usually ask the workers, like, you know, I have indoor plants, what is something that's safe to use indoors? At my local plant nursery, when they sell the insecticidal soaps, they kind of like, you kind of have to give like a scout's honor that you're not going to use it to kill bees or to kill butterflies. I don't know what kind of maniac wants to kill butterflies. I don't know any person that's just out here trying to kill butterflies, but just don't do that. Just be mindful of where you're spraying these things and how you're taking care of these plants. You want to be preventative, but you don't want to be destructive to beneficial insects. So after you've washed the leaves of your plant and sprayed them down with your neem oil or insecticidal soap, I personally usually go for the neem oil spray and water. I isolate my plants. I leave them isolated from the other plants for a few days to a week. If I'm being honest, sometimes a few weeks, depending on what life is doing. If life is life, and then it's more so like a few weeks. The reason I say to isolate your plant is so that in the event, you know, after we've done all of the looking for pests and the preventative measures and washed the leaves and sprayed them down with the soap and neem oil, you just want to give the plant a chance to rest, so that number one, it can become acclimated to its new environment, and so that number two, any pests that you have missed after that point, let's say there's something in the soil that's waiting to hatch and it was in its, I don't know, hatching, it wasn't yet in its hatching period when you saw it at the store, but then there's a baby fungus gnat or something. You want to give all that stuff an opportunity to do its own thing away from any other plants you have. So isolating doesn't mean it needs to be in a completely different room. It can be, if you have space, you know, put them in a different room. It could simply be that maybe you have all of your plants on a particular shelf or in a windowsill. You don't want to put the new plants in that area just yet. You want to give that plant, you know, put it in a different windowsill or put it on a different shelf or a bookshelf away from the other plants, still in a space where it can get adequate light, where you would still be able to access it to water it, but not so that it would, if it were infected with something, it's close enough or it's touching the leaves of your healthy plants that you already have in your home. This is really important when you're bringing plants in from places that are not caring for their plants properly. I love Trader Joe's. Like, I love to shop at Trader Joe's. I think they've got really unique food items and snacks and spices and whatever, all of that fun stuff, right? They are not the best at storing plants. They have a lot of great plants, but I guarantee you, if you go to Trader Joe's right now and look at the plant, you're gonna see something crawling in it. And it'll be a great price, right? You may see a monstera and you're like, oh my gosh, I want a monstera. I'm gonna get this one from Trader Joe's. You make sure you look at that monstera first before you put it in your cart, and you get the one that does not have as many spider mites. And I'm saying as many because I've had to rehab some Trader Joe's plants. As beautiful as they were when I brought them home, there were some creepy crawlers on them. Like, even if you're getting like herb plants, one of my friends got a basil plant from Trader Joe's and it was like infested with spider mites, and they didn't notice it until they had got it at home, you know, so be really mindful of that. So you want to isolate these plants so that they have an opportunity to, again, become acclimated to your new environment, but then also, just in case they are infected with something, you keep your prized possession plants safe. And then you can deal with an isolated incident of some sort of a plant pest instead of having to deal with, like, now all of your plants in your collection have spider mites. And again, the isolation period for me is really important to separating the plants for the pest, but it's just also really important to give that plant a chance to catch its breath. You want to give that plant a chance to acclimate to its new environment. Regardless of, now we're talking about big box stores here, right? But even if you're bringing a plant in from a greenhouse, you know, plant nursery where it was like well cared for, you don't want to just bring that plant into your house and just start doing all types of stuff to it, you know, repotting it immediately and doing this and doing that. You can do that, but if your house is not set up like wherever it just came from, that plant is going to be shocked. You know, like there's going to be a shock to the system, because let's use the greenhouse example for the sake of this video. Let's say you bring your plant in from a greenhouse. It has like the ideal lighting conditions. It has the ideal humidity conditions. It's being watered and tended to on a regular basis by like humans who are trained in how to deal with plants. When you bring that plant into your home, it has essentially been at the spa for most of its life. And now it's about to be sitting on your bookshelf, probably not even as close to the window as it should be, and you're gonna water it when you remember to. No shade to you. If you know how to take care of plants, great. But I'm using this as like a extreme example of like how shocking it can be for a plant to come from like the ideal environment to suddenly be in a dimly lit home, or to be in a bathroom where there's not a lot of light, or just in a very different environment, or suddenly be in front of a drafty window, or in a home where there's a heater running and there's no humidity. So you want to just give the plant a chance to acclimate to its new environment. And then once you give it about a week or two, it may lose some leaves. Don't be alarmed, that's normal. Or it may get some new leaves. You may see some new shoots, you know, on the plant. But at that point, the plant is sort of like adjusted to its new environment, its new lighting conditions, whatever the temperature of your home is, the humidity in your home. It's had a chance to adjust, and then you can feel a bit more comfortable repotting the plant without harming it any further. And finally, you repot the plant. And after I've done all of the cleaning and the isolation period, that is typically when I repot the plant. Now I'm gonna be honest here and say that I'll do all of these great things, and then sometimes I will never repot the plant. You know, if it's been sitting, I'll say this too, right? So if you let the plant sit for a couple of weeks and you're like, oh, it's doing pretty well, it's like, it's growing, it's got some new leaves coming in, then maybe you don't need to repot it. Maybe it's actually okay, especially if it's a smaller, younger plant. Now, if it's an older plant and you can clearly see that it's root bound because you can see the roots coming out of the bottom of the drainage holes, it's worth it to repot that plant, because it's gonna, eventually the plant is not gonna do well because it's just not getting enough. It doesn't have enough space, and it probably has absorbed most of the nutrients in the soil. So it's worth it to repot those types of plants. But once you repot it, you just simply put it into whatever type of pot you want. This is where it is pretty handy to do a quick Google search to figure out the type of soil that the plant likes to be in. If it's a succulent or a cactus, it might prefer a more well-draining soil. If it's a tropical plant, it might want a bit more peat moss or some sort of soil that's going to retain moisture. So just keep that in mind. Or you could just put some old pot and mix and put the plant in there and keep it real basic, and you know, that could just be it too. It's up to you ultimately, you know, to determine how you want to repot your plant, what you want to do, the type of soil you want to put in it. But if you are really looking at this as an investment, especially if you didn't pay a lot of money for it and it's a plant that you really want, you want to make sure that it lives for a while, right? You don't want it to come to your house and immediately die. You're going to be bringing all these plants into your house, and then they're going to be dying and you not know why, and then you become discouraged. So if being a plant owner or a plant collector is important to you, and if you have a lot of plants, it's worth it to take the extra steps to make sure that your investment is not going to immediately go down the drain. I take extra steps to be preventative because I have so many plants. If you don't have a ton of plants, or if you simply just want to bring a plant home and repot it immediately, or whatever works for you, I want to minimize potential headaches. These are just a few tips that have worked for me when I've brought plants into my house or purchased plants from big box stores where they have not been cared for in the best way. And this is how I get these plants back on the like rehabilitation track and just really get them in a good space before I introduce them into the family with their other plant brothers and sisters, because there are a lot of plant kids over here and we try to keep everybody healthy. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Let me know in the comments what types of plants you have found in big box stores. If you've ever purchased a plant from a Trader Joe's, an indoor plant from a Trader Joe's or a Lowe's or Home Depot or other stores, let us know where we can find these plants. Like these, you will sometimes find some gems in the most random stores. Walk in and you see the plant that you've been looking for and you're like, why is this plant here? I don't care why, I'm buying it. It's $10. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if there's anything special you do when you bring home plants, or if there are any other places that you found really great plants that you were not expecting to find them. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks and see you next time.